Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive. You ready to jump into the world of American agriculture? Today, we're focusing on Brooke Rollins, the current U.S. Secretary of Agriculture.
Oh, yeah, and we've got a ton of material here, articles, reports, even some insider scoops. We'll be covering everything from those sky-high egg prices we've all been dealing with.
To President Trump's whole thing about stopping China from buying up American farmland.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll really know Rollins, her background, her top priorities, and some of the most controversial policies she's facing.
Food stamps, immigration, you name it.
It's going to be a wild ride.
So get ready for some surprising facts and maybe even some unexpected connections. We'll help you connect the dots, figure out what it all means for you and for the future of food in America.
It's interesting how Rollins' story really goes against the grain of your typical Washington insider.
Yeah, totally. I mean, she was raised by a single mom in Glen Rose, Texas,
Hmm.
tiny town, like 1,200 people. And she always credits Future Farmers of America, the FFA, with putting her on her path.
Oh, it's way more than just a casual mention, too. In her opening statement at her confirmation hearing, she called FFA a life-changing experience.
I remember that.
And then during an interview with RFD-TV, she said, and I quote, "If asked, what do you attribute these amazing achievements to, I always say, first God, second my single mom, and third, the future farmers of America."
Wow, powerful statement.
Really is.
And it really adds another layer to the fact that she's only the second woman to ever hold this position. Talk about pressure.
Absolutely. But she talked about that, too, in that same interview.
Really?
Yeah, she talked about leading with a servant's heart and creating a family atmosphere within her teams.
Interesting.
She said, quote, "The people that are on my team are part of my family forever."
Okay, I'm sensing a theme here. Family, teamwork, serving others. These ideas seem like they're at the core of who she is. But how do these values actually play out in her policies? What are her top priorities for the USDA?
Well, she's been super clear that supporting American farmers, ranchers, and rural communities is her number one thing.
Which makes sense given her background. But how is she actually planning on doing that?
She laid out a pretty ambitious four-pronged approach, tackling disaster assistance, dealing with animal disease outbreaks, boosting economic prosperity for the agricultural sector, and revitalizing rural America.
That's a lot. Let's break those down one by one, starting with disaster assistance. I remember that was a big topic during her confirmation hearing.
Oh yeah, lots of questions from both sides of the aisle. Senators really pressing her on the need to get aid to farmers quickly and efficiently, especially after all the recent natural disasters and trade disruptions.
What did she say?
She promised a fast and furious effort. Those were her exact words.
Okay, speed and efficiency. Got it. What about animal diseases? That seems like a pretty big deal, especially with avian flu causing those crazy egg prices.
Oh, absolutely. And she took it seriously right from the start. Within hours of being sworn in, she called a briefing on avian flu to assess the situation and strategize.
Wow, talk about hitting the ground running. And speaking of egg prices, that's a major issue that affects, well, everyone. What's Rollins' plan there? I know she's got one.
She does. A 5-point plan, actually, which she talked about in an interview with News Nation. First, biosecurity. She's putting almost $500 million toward locking down barns and preventing the spread of the virus.
$500 million with a B. That's a serious investment. What else is in this plan?
Point number 2 is repopulating flocks that were, well, decimated under the previous administration.
Okay, makes sense.
Third, deregulation. Getting the government, and I quote, off the back of some of these chicken farmers.
Interesting.
Fourth, importing eggs. She announced a deal with Turkey to import nearly 70 million eggs, with more deals in the works.
70 million eggs. Whoa.
Yeah.
But is that even enough to make a difference? Will that actually bring prices down? I mean, how many eggs do Americans eat?
It's a good question. It might be a drop in the bucket, but her fifth point is a longer-term solution, investing in vaccine and therapeutic research. She admitted that vaccines aren't ready yet, but she really emphasized the need to make sure they actually help the problem and don't just make the virus stronger.
Right. Don't want to make things worse. But I remember she also brought up something else during that interview, didn't she? A chart showing egg prices over the past 40 years.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting point. She argued that while avian flu is definitely a factor, it's not the only reason egg prices are so high. She talked about the high cost of inputs, government regulation, and the loss of export markets under the previous administration.
So she's saying this problem didn't just appear overnight.
Exactly. This problem didn't start overnight, and there's no quick fix.
Okay, complex issue, lots of contributing factors. Got it. So let's move on to economic prosperity for the agricultural sector. What's Rollins's vision there?
Well, she's definitely concerned about the financial state of American farmers. In her confirmation hearing, she pointed out that less than half of them are actually turning a profit.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And she believes that President Trump's vision for trade deals and deregulation will ultimately lead to a better future for farmers.
Hmm, trade deals.
Mm.
Which brings us to tariffs. That was a hot topic during her confirmation hearing.
Oh, for sure. Senators, especially those from agricultural states, were really worried about the impact of tariffs on their constituents. Rollins acknowledged that the agricultural economy is operating on, quote, the thinnest margins in history.
Yikes.
But she expressed a lot of confidence in President Trump's deal-making abilities and his commitment to protecting American farmers.
So it's a trust Trump, he's got this kind of thing.
Mhm.
But are tariffs really the answer? I mean, there are definitely a lot of different opinions on that.
Absolutely. Some argue that tariffs protect American industries and jobs, while others say they lead to higher prices for consumers and hurt businesses that rely on imported goods. It's complex, no easy answers, and it directly impacts American farmers' livelihoods.
Which, of course, ties back into Rollins' priority of supporting those farmers. Seems like she's trying to balance a lot of competing interests.
Definitely. She wants to boost farmers' incomes while also navigating these tricky trade relationships. And we can't forget about the other piece of her plan, revitalizing rural America.
Right. What's she thinking there? The average age of the American farmer is 58.
It is. She's talked about the need to attract younger generations back to agriculture and bring prosperity back to rural communities. Specifically, she's mentioned investing in infrastructure, like broadband access, which is so crucial these days.
For sure, high-speed internet is essential for any business, including farming.
Absolutely. But the challenges facing rural America are bigger than just the internet. We're talking about lack of access to healthcare, education, job opportunities, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so revitalizing rural America is a pretty huge, multifaceted issue. And we haven't even gotten to SNAP benefits,
Yeah.
immigration, and that whole issue with China buying up American farmland.
Lots more to unpack.
Oh yeah, and those are some of the most controversial topics on Rollins' agenda. Get ready, things are about to get interesting.
All right, let's jump into some of those more controversial aspects of Rollins's agenda. Let's start with SNAP.
The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, right? Food stamps.
Exactly. It's a vital safety net, for millions of Americans.
But it's also become a real political football.
It really has. It's that classic dilemma, isn't it? Trying to help vulnerable families while also keeping an eye on government spending and potential for, abuse. Rollins is definitely walking a tightrope on this one.
No kidding. So what has she said about it?
Well, during her confirmation hearing, she acknowledged that SNAP is important in fighting hunger, but she also really stressed the need for efficiency and taxpayer accountability.
Did she say if she'd oppose cuts to the program?
She wouldn't commit one way or the other.
Interesting. So she's acknowledging the program's value, but leaving the door open for potential changes. What might those changes actually look like?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. She sent notices to state leaders encouraging them to participate in pilot programs aimed at reforming SNAP.
Reforming how? What's she targeting?
Looks like the focus is on work requirements.
Like making sure that able-bodied adults receiving SNAP benefits are also working or in job training.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big shift. I wonder how that's going to play out. What's the impact going to be on the people who actually rely on SNAP?
Oh, it's going to be controversial, that's for sure. People who support work requirements say that they encourage self-sufficiency and reduce dependence on government assistance.
Makes sense.
But critics are worried that it'll just end up punishing people who are already struggling to find work. People who might face barriers to employment like lack of transportation or childcare.
Right.
It's a tough balance to strike, and the implications for SNAP recipients could be huge.
Okay, so SNAP is a complicated issue. No easy answers. Rollins seems to be searching for a middle ground there. But let's move on to another topic that's deeply intertwined with agriculture. Immigration.
Oh, you can't talk about American agriculture without talking about immigration. A big chunk of the agricultural workforce in the U.S. is made up of immigrants.
Many of whom are undocumented.
Right. And President Trump has been very clear this immigration enforcement is a top priority for his administration. So the question is, how does that impact farmers who rely on this workforce? What's Rollins doing about it?
Yeah, that was a big question during her confirmation hearing, right?
Definitely. Senator Schiff specifically asked her how California farms, which rely heavily on immigrant labor, would survive mass deportations.
And what did she say? Did she offer any solutions?
She acknowledged that there could be a big impact on food prices and said that finding solutions is crucial.
Okay.
She talked about working with the Labor Department and making changes to the H-2A visa program.
Which allows agricultural employers to hire temporary workers from other countries.
Right.
So the H-2A visa program is meant to fill those labor gaps. But is it really enough? Is it a real solution to the potential labor shortage?
That's what a lot of people are wondering. The H-2A visa program has been criticized for being super bureaucratic and expensive for farmers to use.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And even with reforms, it's not clear if it can really handle the scale of the labor shortage if there are mass deportations. If farmers can't find workers, food prices will probably go up,
Right.
which could then have a ripple effect throughout the whole economy.
And that's not even considering the humanitarian concerns.
Exactly. About deporting people who are literally contributing to our food system. It's a multifaceted issue, for sure. Economic, logistical, ethical, the whole nine yards. And Rollins is caught in the middle, trying to balance the administration's hard line on immigration with what's actually happening on farms across the country. Okay, let's switch gears to something that might sound a little out there. China buying up American farmland. Is this really a thing, and should we be worried?
It sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory.
It's definitely happening, and President Trump has voiced concerns about it. In fact, Rollins confirmed in an interview that the Trump administration is actively looking into ways to stop China from purchasing U.S. farmland.
Wow, okay. But why is this such a big deal? What are the implications of China owning American farmland?
Well, there are a few reasons people are worried. Some people are concerned about national security.
Like China controlling our food supply.
Exactly. Others are more worried about the impact on American farmers and rural communities.
Driving up land prices, making it harder for young farmers to get started.
Right.
Do we know how much American farmland is owned by China? Is it a lot?
The exact numbers are kind of fuzzy. But even small amounts of foreign ownership can make people nervous, especially in the current political climate. The idea of another country having any control over American agriculture just doesn't sit well with a lot of folks.
Yeah, I get it. So where does Rollins stand on all of this? What's her take on Chinese ownership of American farmland?
She hasn't really said much publicly about specific policies, but she's definitely aligned with President Trump's America First agenda. So it's probably safe to say that she'd support efforts to restrict foreign ownership of farmland. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Could have some major implications for American agriculture.
For sure. You know, listening to all this, I'm really struck by how many challenges Rollins is facing. It's like she walked into a storm on day one. Egg prices, trade wars, food stamps, immigration, and now this whole thing with China and farmland.
It's true, and that's not even counting the internal challenges at the USDA. On top of all that, she's got to make the USDA more efficient, cut wasteful spending, and basically overhaul the entire agency. It's a massive job.
She's talked about streamlining programs, reducing the burden of regulations on farmers,
Right.
and make sure that all the USDA employees are in the office to make that happen. She's even implemented findings from, wait for it, the Department of Government Efficiency.
What?
I know, right?
Yeah.
But apparently it's a real thing. They call it DOGE, like the meme.
No way.
I know, it sounds crazy. But according to Rollins, it's already helped them find over $132 million in excess spending.
$132 million. That's wild. But is anyone worried about cutting too much too quickly? I mean, couldn't these cuts hurt essential programs?
That's a valid concern. There's always that risk when you're focused on efficiency. You could end up sacrificing vital programs and services. It's a tough balance. Cutting waste is important, but you can't cut corners when it comes to things like food safety, environmental protection, and helping vulnerable families.
Exactly. Which brings us back to the core question here. Is Brooke Rollins the right person for this job? It's a lot, to say the least.
It seems like an impossible job.
Well, she's certainly got the passion and the energy, and she's clearly committed to President Trump's agenda. But can she handle all these incredibly complex issues, balance everyone's interests, and actually find solutions that work? Time will tell.
I guess we'll see. You know, one more thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up is diversity, equity, and inclusion at the USDA, DEI. It's been a real point of contention.
Oh yeah, Rollins has said very clearly that she's moving away from DEI initiatives.
Why is that?
She called them divisive. She says she wants to prioritize unity, equality, meritocracy, and colorblind policies. It's a pretty big shift from how the previous administration handled things.
And it sounds like a controversial one. What's the reaction been to her stance on DEI?
It's been mixed, to say the least. Supporters of DEI programs say they're absolutely essential for dealing with systemic inequalities and making sure everyone has equal access to opportunities within the USDA. They're worried that getting rid of these programs will just make existing problems worse and harm marginalized communities.
Right.
It's just another layer of complexity in an already complicated situation.
That seems to be a recurring theme.
It does, doesn't it?
Uh,
Rollins's decision to move away from DEI has definitely sparked some debate and criticism. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out within the USDA and in the larger agricultural community as a whole. It seems like controversy is kind of becoming the theme of Rollins's time in office. She's not afraid to make bold moves and shake things up.
which fits right in with President Trump's style, right?
Exactly. But will those moves actually help American agriculture in the long run? That's the big question. We've covered a lot of ground today, from egg prices to immigration to Chinese land ownership. It's obvious that Rollins is dealing with a really unique set of challenges. It's a pivotal time for American agriculture, and the choices made by her and the USDA will have huge consequences for farmers, consumers, and the country as a whole.
Wow, we've really gone deep on Brooke Rollins and the USDA today, haven't we? From her small-town beginnings all the way to those crazy egg prices and these trade wars. She's got her work cut out for her, that's for sure.
We just skimmed the surface. Remember her four-pronged approach to supporting American agriculture? Disaster assistance, dealing with those animal disease outbreaks, boosting the economy of the sector, revitalizing rural America.
Right.
Each of those is a massive undertaking on its own.
And then there are the really hot-button issues, like potential cuts to SNAP, the impact of immigration on the agricultural workforce, and the debate over China investing in American farmland.
Not to mention her moving away from diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
The DEI stuff.
Yeah, which has really stirred things up.
For sure.
It's amazing to see how all of these seemingly separate issues are actually connected.
I know, right?
And how what Rollins does in one area can have these ripple effects across the whole agricultural world. It's like this complex web of relationships and competing interests.
So what does all this mean for the average person? Like, what's the big takeaway from all this?
Well, I think it's safe to say that American agriculture is at a crossroads. Rollins is in charge of the USDA at a time of huge change and uncertainty. What happens in the next few years is going to have a big impact on food production, the environment, and rural communities across the country.
And those decisions are ultimately going to affect what we all see on our dinner tables and how much we pay for, right?
Absolutely. This isn't just about farmers and ranchers. It's about all of us. What we eat, the prices we pay, the environment we live in, the future of rural America. These issues touch everyone.
It's like we're watching this real-life drama unfold with no script and super high stakes.
Exactly. It's got the tension, the conflicts, and a ton of unknowns. And we don't even know the ending yet.
Makes this deep dive even more important.
For sure. It's all about giving you the information you need to understand how complicated these issues really are so you can form your own opinions.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Brooke Rollins.
Right.
It's about you. It's about you understanding American agriculture, your role as a consumer, and your voice in shaping the future of food and farming in America.
So as we wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with a question to think about. Rollins keeps talking about how committed she is to President Trump's vision of a more prosperous, self-sufficient, America-first agricultural system. But what does that actually look like when it's put into practice? And what could happen, both good and bad, if she really goes after that vision?
That's a really good question. And it's one that you should keep thinking about on your own. Read those sources we gave you, do some of your own research, talk to people, and decide what you think.
Because this is a conversation that needs to happen everywhere. In our homes, in the government. It's about the future of our food and rural America.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into Brooke Rollins and the USDA. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something new and maybe had some of those light bulb moments along the way.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep the conversation alive.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.